So welcome back. We're still speaking about Chapter 3 of Healing America's Narratives, and that's the chapter that takes a look at the history of women in the United States. And today we'll speak specifically about a current event, which is historical as well, and that's the pay gap between men and women. Generally, the debate around the pay gap centers on two different views of it. One is called the uncontrolled pay gap, where the salaries of all women in the workforce are added up and divided by the number of women, and there's the average salary paid to women. And then the same thing is done for men. And as of 2020, the difference between what women are paid on average and what men are paid on average in all occupations, industries, jobs, et cetera, was about 18%. Come back to that. A second example is called the controlled pay gap, where the comparison is made between a man and a woman who have similar levels of education, similar years of experience, and similar jobs. So it might be two attorneys or two CEOs or two school principals or two teachers or whatever it happens to be. And in that case, the pay gap is about 1%. All right. So the debate goes, in the first one, people say, well, you're comparing apples and oranges because you're comparing what a CEO makes to what a nanny makes, or a secretary, or a cashier in a supermarket. But what ends up, the reason that the uncontrolled pay gap conversation is an important one is when we ask, well, why are there so many more men who are surgeons and CEOs and so many more women who are primary school teachers, nannies, secretaries? And that's not in any way to be deprecatory about any of those positions. And the reason is because historically, women were kept from education, from the workforce, and from the voting booth for decades, actually centuries. There aren't that many centuries in our history. So both of those gaps give us good information, and both are necessary to be considered if we're going to speak about equality of pay, especially in the private sector in the United States. The public sector, if you look at what a congressperson gets paid, a senator, a president, on a federal level, the pay is equal. But in the private sector, it's not. So women are still clamoring with good reason for equal access and equal pay. And there's still a lot that has to be done to make up for what they were banned from doing for the first century and a half of this country's history, and are still somewhat, pushed back against even in current times. All right, so thank you for listening. I look forward to checking in again, probably a couple of more episodes on the chapter on women's history before we move on.